that's where the productivity is lost, not just the
Did
time.
did you stop WhatsApp and Discord as
Yes.
well?
Yeah. I just cut the cord. Cut the cord.
So,
You
but
need
you're not doing that now, are you?
no, I mean it's Sunday.
Okay, right, yeah.
That was close.
I almost got you.
Yeah. No, it's Sunday.
I want to throw a thought in there, Laz, Steph. Just, I spent a year in Jerusalem on a deployment away from my family. And one thing that I observed from that was a lot of people were doing the, constant FaceTime thing, like every night, and then texting all day, every day. And when you do that, and I tried to kind of play that game for a while because it's supposed to keep you connected and stuff, it actually does the opposite. Like, you just feel the powerlessness of your inability to really help in their situation, etc. But by cutting it down, and this is something Crystal and I did by mutual agreement, is it was like Sunday night we would get together, and the and the family would all be in one place, and we'd interact and talk about things, and then I'd email, write mail to my older children and actually answer their concerns, and it was actually a lot more productive as well. And I think just taking that principle, like when you extend that into the realm of social media and even just getting involved in staying up on things, if you restrain yourself to, like, I'm not going to do this constantly throughout the day. Like, if I have to, because my work requires it, I'll look at it like in the morning. I'll have a set hour that I check, do the newspaper reading like the traditional guy, and then you put it aside and you carry on. You're actually going to find that's way more productive during the time you do give to it, and that you're not constantly constraining your other thoughts with these things that you can't control and can't actually influence, and you can be a lot more powerful with how you use that stuff when you do engage with it. Just a thought.
Yeah, exactly. I think the more you can separate it, the better. And again, you will have constraints because you have different responsibilities. By the way, I'm always reachable. So if someone needs to reach me, they can call. And I told everyone who's important that, look, you can reach me, but you need to call because I'm not going to check the messages. It's that simple. And then actually, the more you can separate it, the better. Because what I found is, maybe it's my personality, but I usually have to make a choice. It's like I'm either going all in on something or I'm not doing it at all, because there's no middle ground. It's like I need to be radical. And this is true also, by the way, when I'm engaging in the social stuff. So for example, I've been on the phone since yesterday in the morning. I'm almost back to back, and I'm fine. Like I enjoy it. I like it. Like I like to talk to people, but not when I want to be creative, because then I also have a false sense of accomplishment of I've been busy, I've been sending messages all over. No, I learned something valuable. I reflected on something. I responded. And that's a false sense of accomplishment when my goal and my task was something entirely different. And you can only see it zooming back and zooming out when you can look back on the past couple of weeks and what have I actually done that I decided to do. And that's telling. And actually something magical happens when you manage to separate these things, is that you will actually get more done than you thought, which basically never happens when you are caught up in social media. But exactly the opposite happens. So I believe in always generating momentum, because you are either in a downward spiral or in an upward spiral.
God.
Do you live alone?
This is such a call out.
I didn't check what you said, AJ.
Do you live alone?
No, I have flatmates, and it's fine. Like if I go out in the kitchen, or I even go out to work out, I can talk to the neighbors, so that's not a problem. So I'm not that rigid with it, but I can touch my phone, because the phone is the thing that will suck you in. And I also try to organize calls accordingly. And this also requires some planning.
Only level, well, like when I asked you how would I reach you, you said, "Oh, sorry, I don't take calls from Irishmen." I don't know what that was all about. Right.
Yeah, I'm being caught here.
Yeah, my morning routine is a disaster. Right now, I'd like have a cup of coffee and like look through Twitter. I need to stop that. That is 100%. But you're 100% right. And what it does is, it's almost, it's not about how long you spend in it, but every time you dip in, it's like you lose 20 minutes as your mind readjusts to what we call the creative thing. I want to actually run into a little bit of brain science to talk about this, because this is something I'm studying quite a bit recently. Does anybody have anything to say before I go on a bit of a rant? What do you think?
Yes, something here. One thought. Am I? Yeah. So what I've found extremely helpful is just putting out the notifications, so you don't always get the blink when someone messages you, and just put in your status on WhatsApp and the other platforms that if there's something important, they should call you, and otherwise you're off. That works.
Yeah, I'd say that would
wonders.
help as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, notifications are a huge deal. That's one thing to do. And as I think someone else was saying, that they mute Facebook to oblivion, like they nuke Facebook basically. I've done that before, and that's brilliant. That was Nick, but yeah, that was Nick who was saying that, and that's really, really useful. Any other thoughts before I roll into this?
Have you considered doing a window? Just like, you know, like 2 hours or 3 hours? Because
Well,
you seem very like, you seem like you really want to do it, but you're kind of reluctant. Have you considered like a window of like,
No,
3 hours, I'm not going to look at it or something like that?
It's just sheer inability to invoke discipline. I'm the type of guy who doesn't have very like my problem, the way I win in terms of doing the right thing is environment. So I can't, like, for example, if there's chocolate biscuits in my house, they will be eaten by me. And so what I need to do is not buy them. I win in the shop. That's my key. And I just know myself in that type of sense. But it's not that I don't have discipline. It's that I tell myself exactly what I'm telling you, which is bullshit. But I could invoke discipline. And what happens is you kind of have to invoke discipline tactically. Like, for example, I'll probably have to wrestle my morning free from the social media. And then I don't know, is it a case where I'll have to go hardcore? Like Laszlo is very similar to me. So the way Laszlo found the solution to this is literally to just go like, you know, scorched earth, being like, all right, I'm on the phone too much. I won't see this motherfucker for 5 days, and then I'll come back to it. And that's usually enough to clear your head, like that type of thing. And these are things I need to work on. It's just about getting it done. And like, it's so true about what you're saying. It's actually, it shouldn't be trivialized. When you are caught up in this stuff, it's almost like the wrong part of your brain gets too rewarded, and the good part of your brain, the deep, shall we say, the union self and all that, gets forgotten, it goes back into the mist, and you lose it. And that's terrible for you, because that's the part you want to come out. And that's the part you're always saying, one day I'll finish that book, one day I'll write that thing, and you're putting it away for the sake of someone else's content. So yeah, shall
you
I
can
talk about
physically.
left brain? Go on, Josh, go on.
I was just gonna say that you can physically feel it after you like detox. You can, or at least I can feel like the little hits of joy more from doing simple things. And I could feel like when I'm writing an essay and I'm getting bored or I'm stuck, I just have that craving to grab my phone. And if you haven't done it for a while, when you look at your phone, at least I experience this, I feel it like almost, I feel it in my brain. I can feel like the dopamine almost just a little piece, which is just crazy to me.
Absolutely, dude. Like I have that issue where I stop. A great example is bringing this motherfucker to bed, and I'll be sitting there like on this before I go to sleep. And then when I put it down, usually at about like what, 11, midnight, my head is like glowing. Like I close my eyes and it's like I've been staring at a movie screen. So it's actually glowing on the inside. And the times I don't do that, it's actually like peaceful and black. And my head is quite anxious. Like it's got this kind of finicky and glowy, like static energy going on inside my head after I've been staring at something. And when I don't, as you're saying, there's a very clean, empty, peaceful feeling going on. And that's a physical difference. That's not some type of mental thing. It's physical. I feel better the other way, and I sleep better. And it's little things like that I have a habit of overlooking. Like I do. I manage them quite well. I'm not like completely unproductive, but it's still at the same time that they're there, and I've got to take it more serious. I've got to scorch the earth a bit, I think.
Do you get insomnia from do you ever watch a YouTube video right before you go to sleep, and it's like something very profound, or you read something very profound and just changes everything right before you go to sleep, and then you wake up, you wake up. I mean, you basically you close your eyes and you open them up again 5 hours later, and you realize that you've just been doing like computations in your mind the entire night, and now your day's kind of ruined.
I'll be honest, that hasn't happened to me specifically,
Okay.
but I get similar things, but I'm sure other people have had that. Laszlo was just nodding his head like a
Well,
chicken there. For a
dude, all the time. And I'm like, no, I just need to watch this. This is like life-changing stuff. I need to do it now. But that's in the moment, and then the system collapses. So I'm actually very similar to Staff, but I only found that I can sustain well-being over time only if I manage to embed myself and what I do into some sort of a system. That's it. Like it's a simple concept, and I deviate from it all the time because I'm fucking undisciplined. But when I deviate, I can feel the effects. It will come, and then the opposite is true as well. If I manage to stay disciplined, then just my general well-being increases, and my creativity increases. I give off better vibes, all that stuff. It's just important that that schedule and that system should not be a tyrant. This is a Jordan Petersonian idea that schedule is important, but it shouldn't be a tyrant. So you should organize a schedule so you can do the things that you want to do. Because look, I mean, I like watching YouTube videos, and I think there is value in that. Also, I like talking to people, so I just need to come up with a schedule that can accommodate all that, and it can also accommodate my creative goals. And then also set yourself up for success, because it usually works like a fire. You don't make it happen, but you create the right conditions, and then the fire will emerge, whatever fire you want to create.
What kind of creative work are you doing?
Well, I mean, multiple projects in motion at the moment. I'm not sure if it's in the scope of this conversation, but
you don't have to share if you want. If you don't.
Yeah. I mean, I would be happy to share, but I guess that this is just outside the scope of this conversation. Mainly writing now, and I'm working on a few projects. Maybe Steph and I will talk about it publicly in a while.
Like,
Okay.
I want to ask you a little bit more about this fire you're talking about. Like, is this some type of stick that you're going to put fire on and then charge into a village or something like that? Like, well,
Yeah, you read my mind, dude. You read my mind.
let's do it.
Step away for
I
30
wanna
seconds and
talk
we're
about
already
this a
starting
little bit.
about fire. Missed it.
That's it, man. You have to burn stuff down, man. That's how it works. We're like, he's
Oh,
going.
scorched
quick.
fire. That's probably what it came from, huh?
I'm gonna riff a little bit about this. I've just been reading about this quite a lot recently, which is basically the thesis of mind. Left brain, right brain. You've heard Ian McGilchrist talk about this. I'm not sure how many boys now have listened to Ian McGilchrist, but it's a very, very interesting thing. Obviously, the old school idea that logic left brain, colorful right brain is outdated. That's definitely not a good paradigm anymore. But Ian McGilchrist points out that the studies that support that people derived this model from are actually really, really good. And they suggest a different way of conceptualizing things. One of the weirdest things about it is that the left brain talks, whereas the right brain doesn't really talk. The right brain doesn't have a voice. And so
Image.
the voice you hear in your head may actually be the left brain. And the sort of vague conscience that comes, the voice that whispers sometimes, may actually be your right brain. It's a weird thought, but it seems to come across like this. You know that constant self around talking about, that's what the left brain is like. And they've noticed stuff like when the left gets damaged, or when the left brain, I think you can cut the middle of the brains. It's really weird. You're able to cut them in half, and then you're able to ask both of them questions. So you could show them a picture, and it could be like this calculator. And you could do something where I think you get your left hand to write on the calculator, so your right brain's doing it. And then what will happen is your left brain won't realize that it's using the calculator because the left brain's connected to the other hand. And so it won't realize there's anything going on. And then you can ask the left brain questions about what's happening. And the left brain will give you a ridiculous fake answer. It will be like, oh, well, I'm trying to decide what I'm going to have for dinner by calculating how much money I have. And that's clearly not what's going on. The right brain's just like typing into this or something like this. And so the left brain will lie and the right brain will know what's happening. And this is the freakiest thing ever. I recommend you check it out if you are interested in this. There's a video by CPS Gray called You Are Two. I really recommend you check that out. It's the freakiest shit you'll ever see. And so this voice in your head is delusional, and this right brain is actually more perceptive and aware and silent and more wise. It almost is like the wise shaman or perspective of God. It has the habit of observing things, whereas this is the habit of talking, of analyzing, of criticizing things, which is the freakiest shit ever. Evolutionary, the reason why we might have this, I've talked about this before, is that, for example, I walk up to the well and I want to take out well water. So what my left brain will do will focus on the moment. That tends to have more dopamine receptors. That's to do with reward and behavior. So for example, I go to the well, dopamine says, procedure, go pick up the thing, dopamine kick, go up and put the thing in the well, dopamine kick. So that gets me doing stuff, you understand? It gets me caught up. Whereas the right brain has a way more anxiety receptors, basically. So fear and stuff like this. And so what the right brain does, while the left brain is working, getting absorbed in the little telescope, the right brain is sending out radar, pinging, like ding, what's going on? And for example, right across the hill, you might hear like, and then you hear like, oh my God, it's Attila the Hun really far away or something like this. And then there's like a lot of people freaking out. And my right brain will detect all this and form together this idea of like, oh fuck, there's something going on. But the whole time my consciousness is on the left brain doing this, getting the thing out of it. And then all of a sudden my right brain will override the left brain, will inject it with a lot of anxiety that will snap it out of what it's doing, snap the whole brain out of what it's doing. And then it will like turn it around. And then you'll see like, Laszlo charging in with his saviorism coming in or something like that. But the function of it, this is why you're divided in two. You've got radar and telescope at the same time. And we think the left brain is us, when in fact, there's way more than that. Now, that's a very Jungian idea. You've got, like, I guess, you can see the echoes of the unconscious and the consciousness. And this is like Freudian Jungian. It's not necessarily just Jung. And the thing that I've noticed that's so freaky about this is that the left brain's not creative, whereas the right brain is. The left brain has no content. The right brain does have content. It injects body into things. You can think of it like the way the unconscious is fertile, whereas the consciousness is sterile. It can't make anything. It's not creative. It can only just organize stuff. It's like a computer. You input stuff into it and you get output, but it can't produce stuff itself. It needs input. Whereas the right brain can just like magic, just make stuff happen. It's very fertile. It's very alive. It's very charged. It's very energetic. And so when Laszlo's saying, for example, he comes off social media, what you'll notice is the voice inside your head gets quiet. The dopamine crazy voice. What gets addicted to, what did Facebook say? They figured out that they can hook your dopamine receptors by the notification tab. Right? So that's what the internet, that's what the media does to you. It hooks your left brain in, the talking mind, and it inputs content into the left brain. And so the left brain is satisfied. It's like a woman. It wants content into it. And then it's satisfied when it has it. And then it does what its output is. But it actually makes it really upset. It's a horrible feeling because it's all junk. It's all negative input. You're just putting in like bad news and nonsense stuff. And when you pull out of that and the left brain has nothing to do, the right brain, you go back to the natural state where the right brain starts to flow juicy stuff in, and you start to relax a bit, because when you're not letting the right brain talk, it turns up the anxiety. It goes louder and louder and louder. It's been like, let me talk, you fucking retard. I need to talk. I need to talk. You need to listen to me and all that. And so you can start to see perhaps how this stuff is going down, which is absolutely fascinating, and may contribute a lot towards people who are trying to be creative. They talk about writer's block. They talk about not having enough ideas and all this. It's like, you probably have a load. You're just using the wrong part of your head, you fucking idiot. And this is basically a spiel for myself. Any thoughts, boys?
Just some practical. I think for the boyos who can't like bother to read the actual Master and His Emissary, you can find online and you could rent it. It was worth it for me. McGilchrist actually did a documentary. I think it's about an hour or so, and it's really good. It'll show you like the camera follows him. He goes to patients, and they're displaying pretty much what the division you were like. The lady eats half of her plate, and she says, well, it's all gone, and the whole left side of the plate's still there. And it's really good. It's a really good documentary.
I thought it was really interesting. I was looking at this stuff when I did a video recently on Trevor Green, who's a Canadian soldier, got an axe in the brain. And what's really interesting about that is the way that part of his brain was damaged, but he was able to rewrite that part of himself into other parts of the brain that don't naturally contain those things. And so that's really fascinating because you're actually realizing there that there's actually something of yourself that the brain contains, and it naturally goes left brain, right brain, but it can rewire itself to express the self. And so even if these things don't come naturally to you, if you take the right measures to try and train yourself, you know, even if that part of your brain might not work that great, you can still express that part of yourself by training yourself to embody it in other ways. I thought that was pretty cool.
That's a fascinating idea, all right. Actually, that is a really interesting idea. That it's like it's something outside the structures. No, it's almost like if you've got a load of people and just throw them onto an island, they build institutions like a bank, like a media. They do it naturally. It's like something in them knows. So you can take them out of that type of stuff. That's a very, very fascinating thought. All right, very fair. I wonder who gave us that ability. I don't know. Could have came from anywhere for all we know. Any other thoughts, gentlemen? I guess I should ask Mr. Heather Humphreys. How are you, sir? No, are you muted? I'll try unmute you. Wait there. Should be on. Yeah, you're there, man.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I forgot to say hello, so I'm just saying hello.
Hello. Yeah. I just wanted to say hi, and I'm just listening. Been
Okay, no
following your
problem.
guys' videos. Really good.
Okay, no problem, dude, no problem. Welcome. Hello. Any other warriors got any notions on what we're ranting on here? Any ideas? Any thoughts? No. Anyone found any challenges dealing with stuff? Anybody like got like creative blocks or anything like that? Like, you know, these type of things. Have they've having any? Go on.
I've got some practical advice. I did this last month, I think. I took my computer out of this room right here, and it's pretty much, I mean, I had to bring my laptop in here for this, but this room usually doesn't have any electronics. And so when I come into this room, all I have is books, and I actually took all family pictures out of it and anything that has to do with like modernity pretty much. So it's everything I have on the wall and things, it's like antiquated in a way. So when I come in here, it's kind of like stepping into the past, and it gets you in the right mindset, or the right, I guess, relationship with the unconscious, if I were to put it in Jungian terms.
Yes.
So where like you step in here, and it's like, okay, now it's time to work, you know.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's something to that as well. Even to build on the right brain, like left thing, your right brain being perceptive of the surroundings, like it probably detects these type of things, like this, and it does seem to detect this type of stuff. You overlook it, but it actually has huge impact on things. Like, you know, writing by candlelight is actually really powerful, I find. So yeah, there's definitely something to it. Nick, catch in a moment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I've been trying a different thing lately. Like, yeah, I used to struggle a lot with this. Well, I had a lot of ideas in my head all day long, but then when I tried to write them down, suddenly they were all gone. You know, and I think the problem was the advice, the classical advice I had been given. It was to isolate myself to create, like go to a quiet room without distractions, and just look at the blank page and project what's inside you. And I tried that for years, and it did not work at all. Yeah, really. So what I've been trying to do is to take my notebook everywhere, you know, and while I'm reading something or watching something, what I'm watching or reading sparks ideas in my mind, and I write them down as I'm writing. As I'm reading or watching, and it works, you know, like instead of going to to this empty space. You know, like when I'm facing against, when I'm facing the wall, you know, it works better.
Yes, I absolutely know what you're talking about. It is actually something that is worth saying, I guess, because like what Laszlo's saying is 100%. The most important advice most people can take is like pull out of that. But that's a good point to bring up. Is something else that can go wrong is that if your head is in the way, like I'm going to use the term the left brain. If the left brain is in the way, if it's overactive, if you have a habit of listening to it or overemphasizing it, when you sit down to try to be creative, like you're not going to have anything, and you kind of need to get it back and touch it out other things. So I noticed the idea of notes is brilliant. Fantasies, like visual fantasies. If you notice any of your thoughts are in any way visual at all, paying more attention to that is definitely a great way to start digging into this other way of seeing things. And the last thing I'll say, for me, I went through a similar problem you're talking about, and I started doing dream reading, and it almost like opened the door towards that part of my mind, and then just gave me a permanent access in a weird way. Like I just never really found a difficulty afterwards. It was like completely solving that problem, and comprehensively and quick. It wasn't anything that's that difficult, and all it really was about paying attention to the dreams, because that's the part of your mind that these come from, and it becomes very, very useful in that sense. So I'd recommend trying that as well, my man. Sam.
Nick, I have a question. When you were trying to bring to mind those thoughts, did you ever like, and you say you were staring at the blank page, kind of waiting for things to just come to mind? I know
Yes,
you found
yes.
a practical solution bringing the thing, but if that ever happens and you aren't able to write it down, if you can bring to mind where you were in your head when you had that idea, and maybe you can play with your fantasy of like the things that were around you when that spurred that idea to, I guess, run its course, then those associations of if you could have a good vivid fantasy, the associations where you had that idea would be a lot better than just staring at that blank page, if you see what I mean. It's more of like a right brain, like, let me put myself where I was when I had this idea. Or you could actually go back to where you were. It's just, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to do that, but I guess I also like Stefan, I have a very finicky, anxious mind. But in my case, that plays against me a lot of the time. So when I try to do what you said, it doesn't work. Like there's too much white noise in my head. I can get through and go back to the source.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting problem, dude. I'm kind of working with a couple of people now at the moment, trying to figure out ways around this and what I'm doing. And I think there's definitely something to this idea of a dual mind. Now, what I tell people is dual modes. There's two ways that you can use your head. One of them will be I call it the left brain thinking head, but the other way is the more observant right brain. I guess you need to learn to pull yourself out of one of those, and there's ways you can do this. As I said, dream reading can help for getting the creative side, but there's also what the Buddha was talking about with meditation and whatnot. Samuel, sorry.
Yeah, the Wim Hof method has actually helped me with that.
Perfect. Samuel,
Yeah, no. So I was gonna say that basically, like from my experience, it's not necessarily that like you don't have enough ideas or like you're not necessarily like inherently unable to create. It's just that it's like clogged. Like something I experienced was like going up and just like cold approaching. Like initially when you would go up and you would start talking, it would just be blank. And it's like the idea in the head, like, you're like, and then it's like you just ask for directions, you just like leave, you just run away. But like as you continue forcing yourself, like as you put yourself in those like situations, like I felt my right brain just like turn on its own. It's like I didn't have to ask it. I didn't have to like think about like rationalize like, oh, can you please turn on? Like how can I be creative? It's like before I was like trying to like solve this formula of like how to be creative, but it was really just like putting myself into the environment, and then it did it by itself.
That's a brilliant point. There's something I should have said as well, is that so dream reading is one way of doing it. Very easy. It's not something you do really. It's just something you pay attention to. And strong emotions tend to trigger it too. Psychedelics work, but strong emotions, like if you have a really shocking experience, it will do that. And approaching a girl, approaching a hottie can most certainly trigger the strong emotions. And if you do it a lot, like it happened to me too, you like talk and then you're kind of like, oh my God, what's going on? And then eventually you start to settle into the chaos. And one of the things I found off the pickup dudes that was really useful was the idea of the observational opener. So you walk up and you actually just note something. And that, I found that really useful because there's like an infinite amount of things you can pay attention to. And so it becomes like an almost infinite thing you can say. And once you start to realize that, you're like, how the hell could I be out of things to say? I could just keep like noticing stuff, observing stuff going around and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. There's hands up all over the place. Neil, I know I have to get to you in a second. Josh has been literally sending me death threats on the private chat, so I have to go in.
I need to plug some Milton and some Paradise Lost here because just real quick, throughout Paradise Lost is the struggle between having absolute freedom, being your own master, deciding your own values, versus just being completely obedient to something higher, that being God. And at the end, we reach a spot where Milton presents this idea of being guided by providence, but also choosing. And that's in some of the last lines of the book. Adam and Eve, they are guided, but they are also choosing. I just thought that connects so perfectly. You get to keep your left brain where you make choices like detailed distinctions and you order things, but you're also being guided by something greater.
That's something, and probably a theme you're just going to keep seeing in the videos I'm going to be making coming up. The reason why Paradise Lost, I was going to start shilling it, is because it gives you this representation of this reality where God is running a choir and Lucifer is the guy at the front of the choir, and he's the most talented member of the choir, because that's what your left brain is. It's like an unbelievably important part of you. But the problem is that it has a propensity towards arrogance because it's so damn fucking good. And so what happens is it becomes a diva. And then it says, I can make my own choir. I don't have to listen to God. I don't have to bow to God, basically. I don't have to bow to the choir. I can do my own thing. I don't need to harmonize. And so it falls down. It goes separate, runs away, and creates its own kingdom. Pandemonium. That's hell. And that's hell, man. That's chaos. And then what happens is it's, as I said before, because it gets caught up by itself, the anxiety side of things spirals out of control and it gets trapped in anxiety and it's overthinking and it's trying to build the perfect kingdom. And it would be a lot better if it just said, it turned around and said, all right, how about I solo for God? I will still do a great job and I don't have to do what is the biggest problem, which is like, I'll try and make my own orchestra and everything, which is just absolute madness. It's a brilliant analogy for that thing, to the point where I kind of think, like, this is possible. This is a very crazy thought, but it's possible to think that Milton tapped into the collective mind coming to consciousness of the fact that it was starting to do this more and more and more and more. And there you can start to see Jung's ion with that thesis, because that was around about that time that the Antichrist was coming into the world. But I don't want to get too crazy right now. So, Neil, my man.
All right. Yeah. I have, because you're asking about creative block, I have kind of an interesting experience with that myself. And this might serve as a warning, perhaps, to anyone else. But my experience has been that, for all of my adult life, I was a military officer and I had a very regimented lifestyle. And so, when you come in the morning, you're doing your physical training and then you're dealing with all of last night and yesterday's problems, and it's just a constant flurry of if you want to call it that, left brain engagement that is very practical and pragmatic and reacting to data and trying to form cohesive logical thoughts to respond to that data. And then you might get the afternoon to try and focus on a little bit of creativity, but you're always engaged with reaction to what's going on around you. And then to try and, like going through seminary, for example, I did all of that from basically 10 till 2 in the morning every night, because that's when I'd put my family to bed and, go out and study in the shed and get stuff done. But I formed a habit which has ingrained itself into me. So now my life is quite different. And, now I'm a pastor, and now, when I'm dealing with people, it's generally in the evenings, which is my right brain time that I've trained myself to be creative, and my mornings where I actually have the most freedom to engage in creative thought, it's very difficult for me to reverse that training and to actually engage with an emptying and a freeing of that creativity. And I guess the only thing I've really got to say in terms of my coping mechanism with those crippling ailments I've given myself over the years is that I've just kind of learned to constantly try to feed data to my unconscious, if you will, or you would call it the right brain, I suppose, the creative center, and just let it churn on its own and like not engage with it, but just almost like the idea of praying without ceasing is that, let that work and percolates almost unconsciously, and then it kind of comes to its own conclusions in the end, and you can, I can get to the place where I can just sit down and hammer out a dialogue or a sermon.
That reminds me of something the guy from Monty Python said, where he wrote a script, and his wife came in just as he had finished the script and said, "Yo, motherfucker," well, she might not have said that, but she came in and said, "Yo, there's someone at the door." She might not have even said "yo" either. She came in and she said, "Oh, jolly good. Hello, John. There's someone at the door." And so he went out and he answered the door. And then he came back in. He was excited to see his script because he thought it was good. And he lost it. He couldn't find it anywhere. And he freaked out. He started shouting at her. He's been like, "Damn, that was my next thing. I was struggling for a while to get something out and I got it. And you lost me. You could have answered that yourself. Like, what are you doing?" And he got really, really angry. So he sat down and he wrote it again. And then just as he finished writing it, he found the first script again. And he was thinking, "Oh, well, thank God, this is exactly what I want. This is the good one." And so he pulled it out and he read through it and he's like, "Wait a second, the second one is better. The one that I was writing from memory is better." And he theorized that like what had happened is that he wrote the first script, the idea got generated, and he went off and did something else. And then the entire thesis went into his unconscious, if you will, or the right brain, or whatever. It went into the background and started to actually improve. It started to grow there. It started to get better. And I'm going to show you something from Jung that really gives like heavy weight to this thesis. And then when he wrote it again, it was actually superior. It had been more superiorly organized. I've experienced this a few times with making stuff, for example, that I make a song, and what will happen with the song is it will just rip out in this glorious power. And you'll have the entire bulk of the song from like one snap of inspiration. And then all you really do after that is just edit it to make it better. Like, it's not really that you do that much, but it comes to you in some sense. It's like another part is giving it to you. It's a very weird experience, but I think there's a lot to it, man. I think there's a lot to it. Yeah. We got hands up. We got hands looking to spank. Who went first? I think it was Samuel who went first. Hello, sir. Sam, how you doing, brother?
Oh yeah, so I was just gonna add, like, that experience of putting those ideas into your unconscious mind. I found that, like, when I don't recommend like people do this, but I mean you can if you like want to just try it out. Just like staying up for like prolonged periods of time and just like depriving yourself of sleep, like you will start getting these like crazy visions. And if you do it for like a long enough, I mean it will probably like damage like your body, but like you'll still get like some really good ideas.
We actually do that as part of military training. You make people not sleep for 6 days, and then you see who they really are. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Hardcore, man. Hardcore. Yeah, I've heard of this before. A friend of mine who was like huge into drugs started to turn around and be like, if you just sleep deprived for a long time, it's almost as good as like low doses of acid and stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? You're going to destroy yourself. But he was adamant about it. He said it was a big deal.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it works well.
No, I believe it would. Yeah, I believe it would. I think in terms of neuroscience, like I think something weird happens where if you don't go to sleep, the dreaming mind, which usually is given sleep to come out and do its job, will actually just start to say, all right, fuck you, and start to make you hallucinate, make you have the dream. I think stuff like that can start to happen vaguely.
That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, it's actually there's a lot of science behind that. You can look at Army studies, and they do all kinds of stuff on sleep deprivation and the way that your mind reacts and starts bringing dreaming into your awakened state. And having been through that a number of times. It's a pretty wonky experience.
Gorgeous. Well, that's going to be asked
and-
for the boys. Boys, we'll meet up next Sunday, and no one's allowed to sleep in between. You have to tell us what happened.
Yeah, and actually, Terence McKenna, I think, theorized that, for example, when you smoke a lot of marijuana, then you will dream less. And we don't know exactly why it's happening, but he says that probably it's because the dream world kind of seeps and invades your waking hours. And that's why you actually dream the amount that you were supposed to dream. You just do it while you're awake. Just an interesting thought there.
That maybe, man. Holy shit, maybe. That's a wacky thought. Holy shit. You replace your dreams, yeah.
Classic Terry.
Nick, what are you going to say?
Oh, I just wanted to comment on what Neil said, because I think of it in the same language as he said, like you're churning an idea or you're percolating on it, where you kind of can pose a question to your right brain, and then it thinks about it in the background, running like a process, and then a day later, an hour later, whatever, this idea comes back to you. And I think in some aspects, that's what we do, is we'll pose questions to our right brain, and it will come back with us with an answer, because our left brain can't know the answers, because the left brain is almost like a blank slate. And back to the whole Twitter, iPhone kind of issue with addiction, like the left brain doesn't really know what to do. So it has to ask its right brain, well, what should we do today? Oh, let's make a plan and go do this. But if you're just picking your iPhone, then you're kind of like severing that link of asking, you're not posing that question to your right brain, what should I be doing now? And it will come back to you. You're just immediately electronically satisfying your left brain. And then we're severing that link to the right brain. Yeah, that was just my thought.
I guess, like, if you're going to follow Jung's thesis, he says that, I guess we'll go with the right brain is connected to the dream mind, which is connected to the collective unconscious. And that's the thing you ask for advice. And on the very underneath of that is the God Christ, who's driving all of history with his power of his hands. And then what we're doing is, because we're severing our connection to that, we're outsourcing that to the phone, which is like your little right brain, and then that's connecting you to the connective unconscious, the tech unconscious, which is putting us into the same situation that Elon Musk and Alex Jones are talking about when they talk about the giant AI machine. That's a scary thought, dude. Holy shit, that's really cool. I might try write a fucking script about that. That could be cool. We'll get a movie going and freak everyone out. That's some good stuff. I can do one last presentation from about Jung and all this, and then, but before that, is there any other questions, any other thoughts, any other boyoisms going to come out? Nope. Everyone's sick of me already. Jesus, here we go. All right, here we go. I'll rip into it. So actually, to go off, we could go a little bit fluid with our theorizing. I was talking about that left brain and that right brain thing, and as we said, the right brain is fertile. It tends to have the juice, like it supplies the juice. So the left brain is like a calculator or a computer. It's an input. You put stuff in and you out. When you don't let the right brain put stuff into it, it takes stuff off Twitter, as Nick observed. So it's like got a different input. And what happens is, if you get all that shit out of there and let the right brain input, you get original thought, you get original stuff. And so Laszlo, what was going on with him was that experience, is like the originality coming in, the original juice. Saint Laszlo shows up alongside Jesus Christ, and that's the power that's coming in. It's very vivid and rich. And there's an interesting thesis underneath this, because you'll notice with dreams is that dreams aren't meaningless or stupid. They do have something to them. But of course, we think of them in our paradigm, our enlightened paradigm, as meaningless and stupid. That's not true. That's definitely not true. There's something to them. I've done this with hundreds of people now at this point, is that you can see that there are fantasies and imaginations. They have something to them. I don't know what it is, but they have it. And so Jung actually gives an example of this with a patient he had, where he got her to do therapy. So this is amazing. And this basically shows that there is some type of coherence or intelligent or ordering power within the right brain, unconscious, whatever you want to call it. Like there's something there. When you open up the portal to the magic world, wherever that is in your brain, that actually gives you content that is intelligent and very sophisticated, not just like like kind of, oh yeah, it can put stuff together. It actually can help to a large degree. And especially if you tame the left brain, it can really work together to create stuff that's good. So Jung basically sat down with her and said to her, so she said, all right, the archetypes, the jargon, I get it all. I don't care anymore. I want to do it. And that's the fucking attitude. Like, I remember when I read this, I was like, yes, go on, you girl. And basically, she says, I want to do it. I want to actually experience the individuation. I'm sick of the words. I want to experience it. And so he was like, all right, good. Glad to hear it. Jesus. Draw me a picture. And she's like, what you mean? It's like, paint me a picture. And she's like, I can't paint. And so he says, just paint me a picture about how you feel. And your mind will sort of feel it has to be right. You know, the inner eye will want it to work a certain way. And so she draws this, and it's kind of like, you know, schoolyard 2-year-old, not very, very high quality, just sort of like bad coloring, all this stuff. But she paints it anyway. And this is what she comes out with. And then she brings it into Carol. And Carol says, all right, what the fuck's going on here? And she says, well, look, that's me. And I'm trapped inside the rocks, but the rocks have all the powerful energy in them. And he's like, cool, draw another picture. Let's see what goes on. And so the next picture is the bolt of lightning. So what are we talking about here? The left brain, the frozen, stiff left brain has no content, has no juice, has no energy, has no source, has no electricity. A computer needs to get plugged in for it to work. So what we have is her talking about how when she got in touch with Carol, and he acted as this catalyst to start the process where she's going to, you know, release the juice. And so what it does is the lightning hits this little circle, and this is what felt right to her. So it's very interesting. She's allowing herself to be guided by her intuition, and this hits the ball, and then the ball jumps, and then he's like, all right, cool, draw another picture. And so this is the next picture, and it's the ball keeps going, and so she paints the next picture. Now, I hope you noticed that this is starting to get a little bit better. She's not actually shit anymore. She's never been formally trained in painting, but you can start to see that she's just going off her gut and starting to form, and she's starting to get color theory quite well. Like, this is actually a really well painted picture, in my opinion, in terms of color theory. Or, like, you know, it looks good. This is what I'm trying to say without sounding fucking pretentious. It looks good. All right. And so she starts doing this, and then Jung would start talking to her. And of course, like, he's like, what's this? No, it's like the dark snake and the evil snake, and it's penetrating this. And then all the snakes over here now. And he goes through it, and he explains all the little details that he found in it. And she explains what was going on with her and all the emotions that were coming through. And she just keeps on going. All right. And suddenly she starts to get really fucking good. Profoundly good. All right. And she's just trying to satisfy her eyes, and all of these have very rich meanings. And it's almost like she got out of her own way and let some other part of her head start to talk. And it started to, like, vividly order her psyche. And he said that she started to, you know, get sort of healed a little bit by it. Like, gradually, as she started doing this, putting this stuff together, it started to give her a catharsis of sorts, you know. And then, like, the thing that I want to point out more than anything is the incredible skill. Like, this is someone who's never formally trained in paintings. And look at this stuff now at this point. Like, that's very fucking good, man. I couldn't paint that. I couldn't paint that level of order. And all she's doing is satisfying the inner eye. And it becomes a very, very interesting journey, as Jung explains it all. Look at this. That's so beautifully done. And you must start to understand the Red Book a little bit more as well when you see stuff like this. Like, this is what's going on. Is that it's almost like another part of Jung is talking. And it's a great, and that's the cover of the book. It's a great hopeful thing, because then you realize that, oh my God, there's that much in me if I just get out of my own way and let it happen. So there's something very, very powerful to that. And I think I'll call it a wrap there in terms of presentations. We'll start to wrap it up now a bit. But if you have any thoughts or questions about any of that stuff, lads, like, rip into it.
Well, actually, just a comment on this, because this corresponds to the whole idea of shutting down the distractions. Because even when you can't get out of your head, well, you are facing distractions. It's just your own distractions, you know? And I can give some practical advice. This is something that we talked about with Neil as well. Fasting. Fasting is a great way. If you wanna get into this whole retreat idea of disconnecting from social media, messaging, and then really doing some introspective work, doing some soul writing, as it's called. I think Elliot Holz labeled it as soul writing. You just go into fasting, because fasting will also settle things down. You're not being stimulated, and you're also not being stimulated by outside influences. And then you can actually see what's inside you, like what kind of creative juice you can find underneath. And I think there's no better time to do this. I mean, I would still leverage the pandemic as long as it lasts, and then do some work like that. I think you boys would find it fascinating.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, most certainly. And you can maybe start to understand the mystic traditions a lot more when you combine all this stuff, like the visionary traditions, you know, and why they would think it's like, you know, dreams come from gods, or these visions came from God. Like, think about what's going on in your head. You have your day-to-day left brain, and it's like stuff like this comes from that every now and again and bullies that left brain into submission with these profound emotionally charged visions that sometimes heal you. Like that would, if you were as some dude running around medieval Europe, you'd be like, yeah, that was God, man. Like, that's what happened there. And that's what it would seem like. And then on top of that idea of like the ordering power of it, like, come on, there's something to that. And that's what I like about that thing by Jung there, is that he's not really forwarding a thesis. He's sort of just showing you. He's saying, look at what happened. Like, I can't really, can you explain that? I can't explain that. I can lean on the left brain, right brain thing, and there's something to it. It's very, very interesting thought. So
just
Andrew,
real quick, I wanted to say that when I got to that point when he starts talking about the development, or he tries to show it, about 3 years ago when I was reading the archetypes, and everything before that had washed. I was like, this is good. And then I got to that point and I was like, dude, I don't understand this at all. And and I got to it and I read it through and I was like, man, this is wooey. Just a little anecdotal advice. That initial picture that she drew, and Miss X, I think he calls her, is coming from the ground up. I've seen that since I read that, so maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I've seen that twice in modern, like contemporary art, when someone's coming from the ground up and they're stuck in the ground. And if you look back at that picture, I think she hints at the fact that there's like an egg sort inside the boulders that she drew, and that's intimating that there's something creative which comes later in the lightning. There's a creative aspect in matter, which is the exact opposite attitude that Nietzsche had, actually, because the spirit of gravity was actually his foe, and he didn't like those. It was those dwarves pulling at his feet, like trying to bring him down, and he refused. He wanted the heights. But yeah. You can't really put it in that perspective, because they're starting from different places. Her origins from the ground up, and Nietzsche's already whatever. But I thought that was just a little interesting spiel.
Yeah, that's very interesting. All right, Nietzsche in Zarathustra, the big thing is that he's playing constantly off the idea of upward and downwards. Like, that's if you can read it in German, apparently that's absolutely brilliant. He did that. It's nearly funny, the amount of like puns he creates with the notion of going upwards versus going downwards, or high low. Like, that's a huge thesis. Ubermensch sort of has that energy of a rising man as well, as much as Overman. You know, like over under is another big theme in it as well. Any other thoughts on the madness of the archetypes? Yeah, Neil, fire ahead, man.
Well, as you had kind of commented on possibly talking about shame, I had looked at Bunyan, who has a character shame in his Pilgrim's Progress. There's something very interesting about that parallel where, you know, the idea of shame in his context was that which orders you to keep your feet on the ground and basically stay in the material world, right? And there's a bit of a relatively brief dialogue that Shame gives. I'm curious if you wanted to hear it and just kind of see how that applies in the context of what we're saying.
Rock and roll, let's hear it.
This character, Faithful, says, yes, I met with Shame, but of all the men that I met with on my pilgrimage, he, I think, bears the wrong name. The other would be said nay after a little argumentation and somewhat else, but this bold-faced Shame, he would never have done that. Why, what did he say to you? Asked Christian, and he replied, what? Why, he objected against religion itself. He said it was a pitiful, low, sneaking business for a man to mind religion. He said that a tender conscience was an unmanly thing, and that for a man to watch over his words and ways so as to tie up himself from that hectoring liberty that the brave spirits of times accustomed themselves thereunto would make him the ridicule of the times. He objected also that but a few of the mighty rich or wise were ever of my opinion, nor any of them neither before they were persuaded to be fools, and to be of a voluntary fondness to venture the loss of all for nobody knows what. He moreover objected to the base and low estate and condition of those that were chiefly the pilgrims of the times in which they lived, also their ignorance and want of the understanding of all natural sciences. Yea, he did hold me to it at that rate also about a great many more things than I here relate, as that it was a shame to sit whining and mourning under a sermon, and a shame to come sighing and groaning home, and that it was a shame to ask myself or ask my neighbor forgiveness for petty faults, or to make a restitution where I have taken from any. He also said that religion made a man grow strange to the great because of a few vices which he had called by finer names, and made him own and respect the base because of the same religious fraternity. And is this not, he said, a shame? There's something really interesting in that, because I mean, what he's saying is that shame tells you you can't go there and seek these divine truths. You can't go there and look for things which aren't of the earth, because it makes you a fool. It makes you contrary to the great. It makes you contrary to the science. And it's like you often have said, you know, well, Dawkins tells me I can't look at it this way, so I can't look at it this way. But as we are seeking for creativity, it seems to me that we're often even still ashamed to draw upon God as the source for our understanding.
It's like, it's actually, I think, a unbelievably problematic thesis, in that the way we've constructed our intellectual paradigm, the Sam Harris, the one Laszlo got seduced by, is that thesis of we are the source of all intelligence. Like I'm going to talk about this in the next video, where basically it's the Descartes idea: the rational mind is the only thing that really exists, and everything else is a sort of dead machine that has no meaning and no source of life. And I guess I'm describing here is an entire inversion of that. So you would be ashamed to think that anything out there can give you understanding or knowledge, because there is nothing out there, obviously not a God. But if you actually completely invert that, you see that there's a living world, and that you are merely like almost like a wave that has appeared out of that for a brief moment. And your reason is just like this tiny cherry on top of that. That's the final result of that. And that's a completely opposite thesis. And that leaves plenty of room for something intelligent to be outside of you. And that's the one thing we're just not allowed to say. Like, that's the craziest thing. If you go to a lot of people running the intellectual paradigm right now, like the thesis of non-human intelligence is preoccupied by two things: not God, but instead by the fact that we're going to create it with machines, or aliens exist. That's the only way it can be. And it's funny, not even animals are factored into it really that much. Like they even though they are, we don't really consider that. And the only way I think people start to consider it slightly is people like Terence Bennett, with like, the earth is alive and living and speaks to us through mushrooms. And that's literally the only other alternate that's still a little bit fringe as well. And it's so funny, that's the that thesis, that alone, like, is there something more intelligent than us, or something out there that is intelligent that isn't us, is the one thing we would consider the most shameful perspective, which is fucking crazy, because it clearly shows that we've got such an arrogant perspective. It's incomprehensible. Nietzsche noticed it with the whole Enlightenment. He says this is going to lead to two things. You're going to have a lot of arrogant, rational, stiff idiots who hate humanity. What does that mean? It's like they'll conflate humanity so much in their head that they'll create this standard that no human can reach, of rationality human can reach, and then they'll turn on humanity. And what I've been hearing a lot of people say, it's like, oh, we need to delete the humans to save the earth, and nobody's reasonable enough, and you must be right. And it's, you know, maybe I shouldn't get into that. And Samuel, with the hand up, any thoughts?
I was going to ask a question about, like, you mentioned this intelligence that's outside the human mind, right? So it's like you're not really the only source of it's like, I don't know if the consciousness is the right way of putting it, but I guess it's like that's Carl Jung's idea of like the collective unconscious. And I was just curious, like, where does that like come from exactly? Like, can you like put it like, is it like a genetic thing, or is it just like you know, like
It's a good question. It's a good question, and you're gonna have to forgive me if I cuck on this a little bit, because in order for like I have to stay very, very close to the science and evidence I understand. So I'm not like some thesis level Carl Jung neuroscience. Like I don't know everything about this, and so when it comes to these really fringe ideas, like I'm not sure I'm standing on solid ground. I can tell you that there's very hard evidence to prove what I just showed you about the right brain and the left brain and all that. And then what you can start to say is that, all right, well, the left brain has this propensity towards arrogant thinking, self-aggrandizement. I'm the only thing that exists in the world. It's literally its character. Like it's designed to act like that. I'm just getting some noise off someone. It's designed to act like that. Now, what you can do is you can then extrapolate that the right brain functions as this sort of separate intelligence in your own head. So there's a big thesis right there, dude. Enough to really make you scratch the old beard. Like there's a separate intelligence in your head, and it's well studied now at this point. And this intelligence has a more accurate view of reality. I've talked about this before. They can sever the corpus callosum. They can ask the left brain, how do you see yourself? The left brain will be like, Steph is literally the fucking best. And then they will go around and ask Laszlo, ask Malte, ask Andrew, ask Ryan, what do you think of Steph? And then they'll ask my right brain. And my right brain will be way closer to those four than my left brain will be. My left brain will be arrogant and out of touch with reality. So the right brain's more realistic, and it's quieter, it's silent. So in your head, you have that. Now, as I've said before, this thing tends to give you very, very fertile, interesting ideas. Like it's the source of all your creativity. It's the source of a lot of creativity. It's a good thing. Now, the left brain's good as well, but it's a good thing. So the thesis, if you want to go into the collective unconscious, which is difficult, is that the right brain produces or it gives you juice. Where is it coming from? Where's this juice coming from? What's coming from there? Like where is that knowledge coming from? You know, is there what's in my right brain is coming from the myths that have been programmed into me by my society. Now, it's not something that's easily escapable. It's not something you can just program people. For example, the idioms of the English language, the little stories, the little ideas, all that type of stuff, that all gets put into me. Maybe it's genetic. It could be as well. It's also definitely cultural. And it tends to form this deep reservoir of personality of who I am. And so if I want to individuate, if I want to explore my right brain, my deep memories and all that stuff, I'm going to have to face the fact I'm Irish. There's no way around about it. Like, it's just impossible not to. I'm going to have to face the fact I'm European. You can't skip over this type of stuff. And Laz, I'll talk to you later.
Later, Laz.
So that would possibly a way you could look at it, right? The genetic side of things, I'm not too sure. There's store information in that type of sense. I'm not too sure. You could go into the idea of race and say, for example, like, you know, Europeans are different than Asians, so maybe they express genes in different ways. It means that they have to solve different problems. Some people talk about the idea that the Europeans have a very crazy Faustian energy, whereas the Asians might have a very, very brilliant, like, mathematical energy. And so if you're going to be an Asian person, you're going to have to try wrestle with that problem. The Japanese might have a very strong martial energy. This type of thing. And so as a European, you have to deal with the ambitious, like, I want to sail across the world, I want to go to space vibe, these type of things. And that might be a genetic side of things. And that would be, you know, a lot of us would share this because we've got European ancestry. That's going to be one of our problems. There's a cultural aspect to it too. But as I said, it's difficult to me to give you like a conclusive thesis, because then the next step beyond that would say it's also about reality out there. And that becomes like, is there a God and all that stuff, and what works with that. So it's a very complex problem, but maybe you can just see the way I think about it, which might be helpful. Yeah, sweet.
If I could hit at it from a different angle real quick, if that didn't, I mean, the science perspective, I could hit at it with a philosophical tint. Like the unconscious is a borderline concept. So if you're familiar at all with philosophy, it's Immanuel Kant's like basis for metaphysics. So when we say unconscious instead of subconscious, we're doing that to be more scientific, because it's not consciousness, if you see. So everything that's not in consciousness at this particular moment, and so you can't even draw the bounds of the unconscious with the material body, because that would be, it would it would be unfounded in a sense. Like I've actually, you can kind of get this. Here's some anecdotal evidence. Like if you're driving a car, you can kind of feel the outside bounds of the car when you're parking. So it's like phenomenologically, the bounds of the unconscious, it's unspeakable in a sense. So when you ask the question, it's almost you can't even ask the question. Everything that is not conscious, or everything that cannot be in consciousness. It's like a really troubling abstraction, but I don't know if that helped at all.
No, I know what you're saying. It's almost like you have this vague web or bubble. So, for example, I have the little Stefan that walks around being like, talk to the boyos are here, you say stuff, talk to the boyos. But then there's also this like very quiet, like as I said, the radar of the right brain that feels, is there someone coming in the door behind me, so I have to mute myself or something like that, or like, you know, there is just this really like big bubble of stuff that I'm aware of, but I'm not paying attention to. And I guess that sort of sits into it. And just the size of that becomes unbelievably big when you start to extrapolate it to the fact that I know there's a pandemic around the world and I sort of have a vague consciousness of that. And it's a very interesting idea. Any last thoughts to do? Because my voice is spent. I'm going to have to bounce soon, I'm afraid. No. Man, they're fucking sick of me. That's what's going on.
You gotta do something on Paradise Lost. That's
Yes, I will. I'll definitely name drop it anyway. I was thinking of doing the Red Book and then doing Thus Spoke Zarathustra afterwards. We'll see what people want.
Yeah.
That's an interesting angle. How's that sound, gents?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Sweet, gents. Sweet. Well, look, thanks for your time. Remain juicy, as they say, and I hope you have a good one. As always, this is like art therapy stuff I'm talking about here. I actually think it's very practical. So if you are playing with any of this stuff, like drop it in Discord, Telegram, wherever the hell you are, and we can have a chat about it, see if we can get more of it going. So thanks for your time, lads.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you.